Hey, Jarie, thank you so much for getting on my podcast. I was very fortunate to connect with you online, and to make a soft introduction, Jarie Bolander is an engineer by training and also a tech entrepreneur. Um, he's currently a partner right now at JSY PR Marketing, which is a full service PR agency which helps startups, nonprofits, and professional athletes, and has written a book called The Entrepreneur Ethos. Yari, pleasure to meet you. Before
Yep.
I ask you a couple of questions, Jarie Bolander sounds like a very European name.
It is. It is. It's actually so the first name Jari, which a lot of people do say Yari or Yuri or Jari or Yuri. That I get that a lot. The first name is actually Dutch. So my mom is from the Netherlands, and the last name Bolander is like the most American name ever. And that's because my dad's from Kansas. So it's a pretty odd mix. There's times I wonder how my mom and dad got together, but they did, and I'm here. So pretty cool.
Yari, if I told you I'm a Finnish citizen, you probably wouldn't believe it. I, I know. So everyone, Miguel, I was adopted from South America, Peru, and my father is Finnish. But when I was living in LA, being called Miguel and not speaking Spanish, no one believed me. And right now I'm in London. And on my Tinder, I would write like, "Yeah, I live in London." And it's like, "No, you don't. Your name's Miguel. There's no way you live." So yeah, it's I'm a Finnish citizen, but yeah, I blend in everywhere.
That's great, though. Yeah, no, that's really cool. But I mean, it's interesting because lot of people when they like see my name, they see the first name and then they see the last name and they think, oh, well, if the first name's that way, then the last name must be like something weird too. So they'll usually try to like give me a different last name, and I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm so cool. I don't really mind
Hey,
much at all.
it's exotic. It's
Yeah,
funny because
exactly.
right before I called, I was practicing your name, Jarie Bolander. Like a very Finnish, because I've heard my dad speak Finnish, and now you're like, yeah, you're Jarie Bolander. It sounds
Yeah.
American, actually.
Well, and like my roots, if I did 23andMe, so our DNA is from the northern Europe, from Scandinavian countries. So it's in my blood too a little bit. So pretty cool. Pretty cool.
But no, this is great to meet you. I'm really fortunate to actually have you on the show because I'll tell you a little about me and one of the reasons why I love the tech industry, and I'm trying to get as many people as I can into the tech industry because I built my first platform for 400 pounds, British pounds, and I put everything on a PowerPoint, and I found a developer. I replicated all the best sites, and I led the admin over here. I had a very simple MVP on like less than 8 pptx pages. I built the MVP with this backend developer, and believe me, it costs a lot more than 400 pounds now. But yeah, it was a whole experience. He was a full stack developer, which is like a great technology to build like front end and back end. So there are many people that I meet these days that want to get in the tech industry, but don't have the skill sets to take the first step, and understanding that like if you're not careful, you can blow a lot of money on bad technology because your developers don't tell you they're paid by day rates. And funnily enough, I was looking at your bio. My first tech company that I got experience was at a e-health tech company in Beverly Hills. It was called Alacrity Patient Services, but it was measuring the quality of life with these, peripheral devices like measuring blood pressure, SpO2. And I got to work between doctors who knew exactly what they wanted. And it was my job to work with the developers, and doctors give you 40 seconds, maybe 50 seconds of what they want. They'll change their mind. And you give these instructions to developers who spend weeks, and the doctor would forget about it. So I learned so much of being like, all right, doc, is this what you want? Because they already hate me. You've ruined my relationship with these developers. So yeah, I got to work with the tech industry. I love helping people get in the tech industry. And you live like in San Francisco, like the heart of like technology. I mean, your network must be completely different. In London right now, I mean, the Moorgate area, it's super quiet. But yeah, I'd just love to know more about your career and yeah, what it's like to be in the Valley and any advice that you would have, even horror stories. And giving advice to like young people that want to get in the tech industry, especially when it comes to um, devices as well, like if you're early stage, because many people have like, you know, I've heard a couple of people saying, I would love it if I could connect this little device, you know, but you know, the whole concept gets so far ahead of them.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. I mean, yeah, so I live in San Francisco. I grew up here in Silicon Valley, so went to school down at San Jose State. My first job out of college was at a startup. It was actually at a semiconductor startup, which not a lot of people even know what that is, but we made computer chips. So my first experience was manufacturing computer chips. And back then, that was the mid 90s. That was a big hot thing to do. There's a lot of money in it because people were starting to realize that Moore's law was going to allow computing to be ubiquitous. And nowadays we talk about ubiquitous computing and IoT devices and, you know, artificial intelligence at the edge and all of these things. And back 25 years ago, that was a complete fantasy. No one knew how that was going to work, right? And so I just really got luck. A lot of it was luck, and a lot of it was like I was just interested in electronics, and started to go to all of these startups, and they were mostly hardware semiconductor startups. And nowadays, there's actually not a lot of semiconductor startups because it's a lot of money. And all the venture capitalists in the Valley just love to pour money into SaaS or direct to consumer. I mean, you know, it's hard, but it's not as hard as hardware because hardware is hard. Medical devices are hard. And the reason they're hard is because it's a different skill set to try to design a piece of hardware. Connecting it to a device, you know, what I do at my firm now is not only do I help startups, professional athletes, and nonprofits, but I've moved more into helping IoT, smart home, and consumer medical device companies, especially startups, figure out how to launch into the world. Because what I realized after doing this for 25 years is that there's a lot of things that get in the way, especially of complex systems like I've got an app. It's got to connect to a watch or a sensor. That sensor data then has to go from the sensor to the phone, to the phone to the cloud. Then we got to make a decision on it. I mean, it's just really complicated. And it's unfortunate that not a lot of money for that anymore. I mean, you do find some people that are still doing it. And the thing that's just beautiful about being in the Valley and seeing all this sort of stuff, although nowadays everyone's quote unquote leaving San Francisco for greener pastures, which that happened in, 96. It happened in 2001. It happened in 2008. It happened in 2020.
Right now.
Yeah. I know, going to Austin or Miami or whatever. And great. Yeah, hey man, free to be you and me, but I'm not leaving anytime soon. So yeah, I mean, for me, the real thing that like got me into being an entrepreneur was just the freedom to create and people saying that it could be done. Like there were constraints, but the constraints were all like in your mind, right? Like we would come up with these great ideas and then try to figure out how to build them. And so for young people, what I always tell them is you got to get into entrepreneurship as a lifelong journey of exploration and learning. You probably will not get rich. I mean, full stop. It's a hard job. The probability is low. But the beautiful thing is you get many shots on goal, to use a sports analogy. Like you can go from company to company and you can build a great life, and you actually build an independent life that completes you. That to me is worth so much more than just money, right? I mean, I've been at startups that have exited for $750 million. I've been at startups that completely imploded. I've been at startups that have been walking dead. I've been at all these sort of things. And each one of them I've learned that, wow, I'm really in the entrepreneur game for the journey. Like, I just love the freedom to create. I just love the fact that I can sit on a phone call with you at, 1:00 in the afternoon or whatever it is here, and you're in London, and we can chat about the thing I love to do. And so for young folk that are thinking about, oh, kind of want to give this entrepreneur thing a shot, I always tell them to sort of do a side hustle, figure out like, really, is this for me? It's, you know what? It's not for most people, actually. Most people would not want the variability of income, the potential for setbacks and challenges. I like to say there's no real failures. It's just another opportunity to learn, because you got to have that mindset because it's such a tough job. So yeah, I mean, in the Valley specifically, since there's so many of us around, it's just such a great community of people. And partly the reason why I wrote the book, The Entrepreneur Ethos, was to sort of champion a better environment, as well as build a more ethical, inclusive, and resilient community, because I think anyone can do this job. But more importantly, it's just good to sort of give back as well. And yeah, so that's why I love talking to you, and then just can't wait to, help more people. Give it a shot if you really want to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's great that you were talking about passion for passion for entrepreneurship, because I graduated from college in '09, and the degree I took, out of all times to take it, I took entrepreneurship. And everyone's like, what is that?
Yeah, well, that's true too.
Yeah, like, what is that? And I remember I was, I had this analogy, but it's something you can't really learn. You have to like just do it. Like, you have to figure out how to open up an entity. And and my mistake was I didn't file my taxes in time, and I got penalized. And after that, I knew everything about corporations, LLCs, S corps, pass through. So, those are things that you didn't learn. But I tell you, and I love that you talk about like passion, because my first startup, and this is why I tell people, and I always get nervous when they say like, hey, I'm going to build this. And I always like, okay, well, what do you like? Build your MVP first and prove this works. Because I've seen my first startup, I'm going to say the number. I blew about 60,000, on my first startup, and I built it. And it hurts me because that's in code. I could have bought a beautiful SL Mercedes instead of in code. But there was never a point that I was crushed. I was like, okay, well, that's feedback. I don't know what I'm doing. But I stuck in it, and I really thought I knew. And then I remember the best thing that happened to me was, I needed a hustle. I needed to still make money, but I still wanted to be. So I ended up working for this SaaS discovery platform in London. And the pay was enough to get by. But what they taught me, and I remember I went in there, like, they hired me because I know what I'm talking about. I've worked at tech companies, and they just explained to me, you don't know anything. Like, you don't even know how to do mass outreach. You don't know how to scrape leads. You don't have to automate. You don't know about IP tracking. And I realized, and then like I had ideas, and it was like, Mika, if you can't, give me three, like if I pitched my idea, like how much is it going to cost? What's my return? And when can you execute it? And if I couldn't answer those three, don't pitch. So these guys taught me so much. And then I decided, okay, well, now let me go back to my original platform. And then, obviously with budget restrictions, I rebuilt it on that 400 pounds in MVP. It worked. I got end users. Then I said, okay, well, now let me build a proper back end, a dashboard now for employers. I learned from those horrible experiences, because my first platform was way too complex with multiple users, different permissions. And then I said, okay, my next platform, it's going to have no people logging in, just mass end users that can navigate the platform, because I don't want to spend the money and having a bug. Well, he can't, reset his password. So I made mine a content platform, and it's so much easier now, me and my developer, because we can just quickly check the front end. Everything works fine. The admins now can post jobs very easily, but this was just such great experience. And these experiences, like I get nervous sometimes, because I'm 35 now. I've blown my shot for working at Deloitte as a consultant. So, I gotta stick it.
Oh, you'd be miserable. You'd be miserable.
I know. I have no gray hairs yet. I love what I do. But I love what I do. And I just, I always wonder what's next. Like you're right. You do need to understand that like there is no guaranteed exit. That's like a very small percentage. You definitely need to understand that, this is being in a startup is like being in a marriage, and you have to make a decision on
Hmm.
who's priority. Like I guarantee you, like ruined my dating life, especially in the early days, because like you
Yeah.
pay a developer or you take her out to a really nice restaurant, and how easy is it to say, "I'd love to take you out to dinner, but we're gonna have to spend coupons and split my
Yeah.
subway, points." But I mean, have you when on your first couple of days, what was it like? Did you ever build anything? Like obviously that was like bootstrapped or.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So like the first startup that I was at that was actually the founder of, it was a semiconductor startup. We actually had to raise a lot of money. We ended up raising about $8 million, and then it evaporated. We ran out of money and couldn't do anything. And the lesson I learned from that one was we really didn't have a market for the technology that we were building. And back in the day, this was 2002, 2003, maybe. I'm almost 50, so I do have a little gray hair, and I will never work at Deloitte, because I just won't. But back in the day, a lot of times people would just fund a good idea, and they would like quote unquote figure out the market later. That is a bad idea for so many reasons, and I've learned that like I just will never do that. I actually want, when in any idea I look at, is there a market before I ever even consider trying to do it? You never want a solution trying to find a problem to solve. You always want a problem that is just so massive that even if you screw up execution, you'll still be successful. And those are really hard things to find. And a lot of times, a lot of entrepreneurs, they'll scratch their own itch, right? They'll be like, oh, I got this problem and I built this thing. And that's great. But you really need to know if there's end user demand before you waste your time and effort. That's why the power of a minimum viable product is just so critical. But the thing is like, as you learn this job or this gig or this lifestyle, you start to realize that you got to put your ego aside. The ego is going to limit your ability to solve the problems you need to solve in order to find success. So if you've got this great idea you're in love with and no one wants to buy it, throw it away. There's no reason to work on it, even though, oh, what do you mean? They don't understand. No, the market understands. They don't want it. Well, I mean, you could have I can't tell this story properly. Okay, that I'll give you. But once you can tell a story about what you offer in simple language that your grandmother can understand, and no one wants to buy it, drop it. It is not worth the effort. Trust Uncle Jarie on this, friends. It's not worth it. I have blown so much money, so much time, and so much effort on ideas that were great technologies, great things, no one wanted to buy. And so this whole idea of like, minimum viable product, side hustle, bootstrapping a company, if it's like a SaaS company, that's a lot easier to start because it's just software. Right now, there's the no code movement. You could put something together for maybe not 400 pounds, but thousands of dollars, roughly. I mean, not, you could try it out, right? And that is the reason why all venture is sort of like piling on SaaS and software, because it's just so easy to iterate, and why they're not going on hardware platforms. Although nowadays, since semiconductors are so ubiquitous and computing's everywhere, there's a lot of like development kits and hardware that you could build something to see if it makes any sense, right? But that's another barrier, right, to get through. So yeah, I mean, the last company that I was at, which we're still sort of around, we're still sort of working on, we bootstrapped that, and it was a hardware company that we used off-the-shelf components to track the temperature and location of perishable medical supplies. That's important. Turns out it's not as important as we thought it was initially. So we've had to kind of zig and zag and kind of do some other things, but that was an easy thing, easy piece of hardware, easy kind of product to MVP and try. And yeah, it's a hard thing because a lot of times, people get really wrapped up in their ideas. And I think that's one of the fallacies of, passion. Like, so you talk about passion, which I agree with. I also agree with, you have to have passion, you have to have discipline, and you have to put your ego aside. Because if passion can get in the way of the real idea you should be working on. And the fine line is that, oh, I really like this direction, but then you got to say, it's going nowhere. Stop. Like,
Yeah.
do something else with your time. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, I think yeah, that's absolutely true. Like I try and help quite a few people out, especially because I learned so much about lead generation. I ended up because I don't have an agency as well. I ended up becoming an advisor to quite a few, not early stage actually, funded companies, helping scale up their mass outreach systems, automation, lead scraping. But because I've been exposed to that, I get now a lot of younger people, reaching out to me. And you're right, there is somehow a disconnect on like logic of the business model, and then sometimes way too much expectation. Like, well, I'm going to get a UX developer, I want to build, and sometimes there's not enough research done. Like I hate, like, and I was like, buddy, I think the pain point you're trying to solve has already been done by a company that's invested millions. Like, it's not genius, and it's really tough. It's really tough. You're like, sometimes you need to let them. And I was one of those people. Like, you sometimes have to learn a little hard, hopefully not to my extent or, funded extent, but you do have to learn sometimes where your ego can take that one step of putting you, screwing yourself pretty much, and
yeah,
that's
sure.
happened, but
Yeah.
I mean, because, there's, when I lived in LA, the culture in California, even compared to the East Coast, and especially being here in the UK, is completely different. Like, I think one of the reasons I do really well in Europe is because I have that American entrepreneurial mentality. Hey, let's just try it out. Let's just do it. And, let's not make it awkward. Let's just pick up the phone and actually try and execute quick. I think you're in, like, LA is also different because there's a lot of soft money and people willing to experiment. And, you go to a dinner table and have dinner with them because you're recommended to go there, and they'll cut you a check and they'll say, after due diligence, cash in, like, we want to invest in an early stage startup. But you're in San Francisco. Like, I mean, I've been watching a TV show, Silicon Valley, and
Yes.
I love Russ, what's it called? Russ, the investor Russ.
Yeah,
Where he had Russ
it's Hardiman, Russ Hardiman. Yeah.
I want an investor like that. Like,
he's the Trace Commas Club. They actually launched a tequila called Trace Commas too. So
yeah. I'm a billionaire with an M. Like, he's so angry. It's like, I want cars that do this, not this.
Yeah.
Do this.
Yeah. So it's funny. It's so funny because so the show Silicon Valley is, of course, a hyper caricature of Silicon Valley culture. And there is absolutely some truth to what happens on that show. So just so you know, there has probably been a situation in Silicon Valley, real Silicon Valley, that's actually been portrayed in the show. And it is true that it's a little eclectic here, and there are investors like Russ, maybe not as many expletives and four-letter acronyms, but certainly they're very colorful. And, of course, every venture capitalist wears a vest and all that sort of stuff. But the funny thing about Silicon Valley culture, and it's something that a lot of other, areas have tried to duplicate, right? And the reason why it's so powerful here, I think, one, it's, in the 1950s, early 60s is when the sort of the idea of venture capitalism just actually started. And one of the rules that Sequoia had was that all of their companies had to be within a bike ride from the office. And the office was on Sand Hill Road, right? That's where all the venture capital, or at least maybe it wasn't then, I'm not sure. But the alchemy of talent, capital, educational institutions, the general disposition around here. I mean, it's California. We're super granola, touchy feely, eat bean sprouts and, veg, whatever, like we're the classic commercial, the California cooler commercial was, a formal dinner party means you wear socks instead of no socks, or, it's just, we're just laid back here. And it's a little bit different on the West Coast than it is on the East Coast. So East Coast, more New York, finance, they're more intense. You can tell, like you go there, you just feel the intensity. Where here, we're a little more laid back, but we have a different intensity. And the essence of Silicon Valley, the attitude that's portrayed in the show Silicon Valley, is pretty spot on. It's just pretty spot on. It's when I remember some of my buddies will watch it, will be like, oh, wow, how did they know? Because some of it's like, yeah, I remember an investor like that. And if you've pitched tons of venture capitalists, which I have, and all my buddies, you've heard it all, right? And I do think that the beauty of what we have here in Silicon Valley, and what I think other areas and so in other countries and regions are trying to do, which I think is very valuable, is how do we encourage people to take risks and build businesses and really create an independent life that completes them, like, because that's what we're trying to do here. That's the reason why everyone's attracted here. And I hope that more communities can do that. Even Miami and even Austin, and even Nashville, which has got a big startup scene as well, Seattle as well. So I think it's just a question of, for me, when I look at like how, the outside world perceives us and the way the inner world is, I do hope that we start to get, well, I hope we share more. That's the reason why I do the Entrepreneur Ethos podcast, which is my podcast, to just sort of like, we're all in it together, and we should, like you said, give advice to the next generation, help those people that need help, educate them, like give everyone the best shot they can, because this job's for everyone. There's nothing stopping anyone other than passion, discipline, determination, and a little bit of help.
Jarie, listen, it's so refreshing to speak with you. I haven't, as you know, you are my second guest, but I love talking to other entrepreneurs, especially those who have been through it. I have not, I've never gone to a venture capitalist. For me, I managed to bootstrap the entire platform by working in different companies, and even at one point I had to wash dishes because I overspent it. Oh man, I mean, I'll tell you quickly, but I was working at the company I was telling you about, and I was on an average salary, just under enough to live in London. And obviously, I decided like, hey, I need a better dashboard for employers. Before I really even had employers, but I couldn't upload the jobs in JSON anymore. It was just like so brutal, and because my jobs are basically with pins and geolocation and then data, and I had overspent, and I was like, I think I can barely afford rent, and I definitely won't eat. So I called one of my friends. I'm like, hey, you're the head chef of the restaurant. Can I work outside in the outside kitchen over the summer during the World Cup? And he was like, yeah, sure. I was like, okay, another favor. Can you pay into the company Horizon Limited so I don't get taxed, because then I can just write it off and then just pay to the developer in installments. And he's actually our CTO, and I paid in installments, and yeah. I mean, I've come a long way now.
Yeah.
But the advisory roles are fading. But yeah, my point is, we didn't have to sell or like I didn't go to angel and venture capitalists to raise like a large fund, and I'm waiting now. I need to hit that first milestone, and my first milestone I want to have is consistent growing MMR, and I want I'm not at the 10,000 MMR, especially being in employment right now. It took a huge dip of
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
employers paying, so I'm waiting to April, and also I'm a content platform, so I'm just going to focus on content now. But at some point, I probably will give you a call, like, hey, if you could just look at my business plan and hear my pitch, I'd
For
love to pitch
sure.
it to you.
For
Because
sure. Absolutely.
yeah, but
Absolutely. No,
we're
that's great.
I
Yeah.
will definitely head to your area of town, because I would love to meet like the new Russ 2.0. Even if he says no, I just want to get grilled and see him with cars. So like this, not like this.
Well, I mean, it's funny because, again, it's a caricature. Clearly, there's people that, I mean, there's a lot of great venture capitalists. I know a lot of them. They're awesome people. They're really trying to help out, especially the ones that are into digital health and really trying to like grow sustainable businesses that help people. But like the that character is just a mishmash of all the interesting ones that have been in Silicon Valley and will continue to be in Silicon Valley. So yeah, it's not a problem helping you with that. I mean, like that's what's great about not only having a show that I have, but also talking to other entrepreneurs. Is one of the things that that I've always known about the community of entrepreneurs is they're always willing to help. I mean, some of people are busy, they're growing, blah, blah, blah. But generally people are pretty cool about like, yeah, send it along. I'll take a look, for what it's worth. It may be some nugget of information or something you may miss, or more importantly, it's just feedback. And that's the thing. That's the reason why we build MVPs. That's the reason why we have, the one metric that matters. That's the reason why we have, try to find product market fit. It's all about that feedback loop. How fast can we get feedback so that we can adjust? How fast can we get feedback so we can say, yeah, I should work on this. I should double down on it. Or, yeah, I got to put that one on the shelf for now. No one cares. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the ultimate, right? That feedback loop is so critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Jarie, it's been a pleasure to have you on my show. And I look forward to hearing from you in the near future. I'll definitely stay connected with you on LinkedIn. Everyone, make sure you pick up. I'm going to put down a link at the bottom as well, and I'm going to place it right beside you, the Entrepreneur Ethos.
Oh, thank you.
How to build more ethical and inclusive and resilient entrepreneur community. And I'll make sure to also put the link on the website. So, but thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, appreciate your time. Keep up the great work. It's an honor to be guest number 2 of many. I started my podcast March 16th, 2020. Up to 82, 83 guests. And I'll say that it's been such a rewarding experience to talk to entrepreneurs like you're trying to do, different perspective, just really, it's just a beautiful thing you're trying to do. And it can sometimes, like anything, be a challenge and a struggle, but boy, the rewards are just, you get to talk to great people like you. So it's just so awesome.